The implosion of FTX, it's like something out of a movie, and as the stories unfolded, it's continued to become more and more bizarre. I'm certain Netflix is scrambling to produce a documentary to make sense of it all. In the meantime, I thought I'd gather a bit more clarity on the situation by phoning my friend Dr. Gleb. Dr. Gleb has 20 years of experience consulting for companies like Aflac and Honda, and by background is a cognitive scientist that has studied behavioral economics and the cognitive neuroscience of strategic decision making. Dr. Gleb, for those out of the loop, can we just recap on what exactly we've witnessed with FTX? Why did it come crashing down the way it did?
So it's a very interesting question because there's a lot of shady dealings going on, and we will not know the details until the bankruptcy court finishes the procedures, of course. But what we know so far is that Sam Bankman-Fried, who's the CEO of FTX, he also owned a separate trading company. So FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange where people can put their money and get an exchange, cryptocurrency, stable coins, and so on. Now, he also owned a trading company called Alameda Research separately. So he was the owner of that, and he was the owner of FTX. And there was a group of executives who were running them pretty much together. They lived in the same penthouse in the Bahamas. We can talk about that. Now, what happened was that Alameda Research made some pretty bad bets on cryptocurrency. And what it looks like happened is that Sam Bankman-Fried used his authority as owner. In fact, he appears to have installed a backdoor into the systems of FTX to loan out customer money to Alameda Research, which customers left in the FTX deposits, not thinking that it was going to be loaned out. He loaned it out to Alameda Research to cover their bad bets. And then Alameda Research made more bad bets, and that's when the whole thing came crashing down as the bad bets became unsustainable and there was a run on the bank, meaning people tried to withdraw their money from FTX. And of course, FTX didn't have their money to cover all the withdrawals. And that's why FTX ended up in bankruptcy, so did Alameda Research and about 120-ish other entities under the FTX umbrella. As I said, the whole thing is very complicated, but I'm giving you the nuts and bolts of the essence of what's going on.
You recently wrote a piece on how it was SBF's decision-making philosophy that caused the downfall of FTX, his high-risk, high-reward approach. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So I was listening to a podcast with a well-known economist, Tyler Cowen, in March 2022, so this year. What I heard was the podcast with SBF. So he was on the podcast, and he was talking about his philosophy. And Tyler Cowen asked him, so SBF says that he is a follower of utilitarianism, and a specific form of utilitarianism that tries to maximize value. Utilitarianism is a philosophy that tries to do the most good for the most number. And there are a number of variants of this philosophy. He is a practitioner of what's called naive utilitarianism, meaning just purely maximizing well-being and taking appropriate risks to maximize well-being. So Tyler Cowen asked him, imagine that you have a bet to make. There's human civilization as it exists right now. Imagine you could double the value of human civilization, which from a utilitarian perspective is very good. It's double the benefits of human civilization. Now you can double it at 51% probability, or all of it will disappear at 49% probability. So would you take that bet? Double or nothing at 51% versus 49%. That's essentially a coin flip, a tiny bit better than coin flip. Now, the vast majority of us would even find the question morally atrocious. Like, how could you be responsible for the whole of human civilization disappearing essentially in a coin flip, right? But SBF, he bit the bullet. He said that, yes, I would be willing to take that bet because he is a very purist form of utilitarianism, not purist, but a variant of utilitarianism, which believes that the more good you can make for the most number, the better things are for everyone. And so, if you think back to that philosophy, that is an incredibly risk-taking philosophy. That means that if he believes that he can take enormous risks behind the scenes, including on cryptocurrency, for the sake of increasing his money, for the outcome of creating more good for more people, then he will take those risks. And if we think back to what was happening in the spring and summer of this year, we had what's called crypto winter, meaning that crypto prices went pretty steadily down, seriously down. And Alameda Research was making very strong bets that crypto prices would stay up or go up. So when Bitcoin went from 60,000 to 50,000 and 50,000 to 40,000, 40,000 to 30,000, it was certainly possible at any of those stages that Bitcoin would go back up, right? We don't know that. And Alameda Research at each of those stages was making bets that Bitcoin would indeed go up. And so you could see the risky nature of these bets, where it used customer money essentially to cover its bets. So that was what I heard. And then when I saw the actual background of why FTX went bankrupt and Alameda went bankrupt, it all made sense. That's when I realized that he was using this incredibly risk-taking philosophy, risking everything for the future where Bitcoin would be worth more than it is right now, when he would win a lot. But he lost the coin flip. And that is a very strong indication of the kind of danger you run into with these risk-taking entrepreneurs, where they don't have risk management and oversight. Clearly, they didn't have that at FTX and Alameda Research.
You don't become a $32 billion company and raise upwards of $200 million from a VC like Sequoia Capital without having a promising business. Sam had something, and he certainly doesn't strike me as dumb or as a fraudster. So how did he consistently manage to make such bad and unethical choices? Was it the lack of accountability by virtue of being in an industry like crypto?
I think it's more about the vision that he had of the future. Now, Sam is brilliant. He is a visionary. And he had a vision of a brilliant future which would take place in a different timeline than ours, where Bitcoin didn't go down that much, and maybe it went up because people had different perceptions about what Bitcoin were. Maybe we didn't have such inflation as we do, and thus the Federal Reserve and other central banks wouldn't have raised up the interest rates, making it more expensive to own speculative assets like Bitcoin. And so his vision, he's incredibly smart. So the way he made his money initially, and this is a really cool story. So apparently he was able to arbitrage Bitcoins, meaning at a certain point, Bitcoins were worth less in the United States than they were in Japan. So he bought Bitcoins in the US and he was able to transfer them to Japan, take advantage of that arbitrage opportunity and make quite a lot of money on that arbitrage opportunity. Because at that time, there weren't these sort of exchanges that you can do that. So he was able to do that. And that's an example of his very smart approach, where he was able to arbitrage. I think there was a 10% difference or so. And imagine with every transaction, you can grow your capital 10% pretty much guaranteed. So that's very huge. So he made his money that way. Then he built the exchange, FTX itself. And FTX is an exchange. The reason that it got to be so popular, such a huge status, and he founded it only in 2019. So much later than other prominent exchanges like Coinbase. The reason he was able to do so well is because he built a really good product that people really wanted to use. So he was really innovative in creating a very good exchange. So his decision-making in this business, in terms of how to run his business, was pretty smart and to operationalize it. But the bets that he made on the future, thinking that, for the future, to have the future I want, cryptocurrency must be worth a lot. And therefore, I will bet on it being worth a lot. He was really wishful. It was an example of wishful thinking and very big risk-taking, which, a lot of entrepreneurs do, right? A lot of startups fail. And there's a reason that startups fail, because people have wishful thinking and they take huge risks. It's just that not many startups get to the level of what happened with FTX, where at one point it was worth 32 billion and before failing.
Yeah, it's interesting that. What would you say to those people that say that Sam was just out to defraud people and that crypto is just a giant Ponzi scheme, and this is just an example of it all unfolding, like the house of cards just tipping over?
I definitely think that crypto is a very dangerous commodity. It's inherently speculative. And this situation shows us why. There's no regulation, there's no risk management, there's no compliance, there's no oversight. So in my article, I talk about that as the key issue. There was no risk management, there was no compliance, there was no oversight, as we're discovering from bankruptcy court right now. All the executives, the top level executives, lived together in a penthouse, all together in the Bahamas, and apparently they dated each other, very socialized together. So they really, if somebody suspected problems, fraud, they had very strong social ties, mutual ties to each other. And so that they were not going to betray each other. And that is the opposite of what you want. You want risk management, you want compliance, you want oversight. In fact, this information got out because somebody leaked the bank spreadsheet finances of Alameda Research, and which showed its losses. And that's what caused the run on the bank. So, but that probably was not at the top level. That was probably at the mid level somewhere, who had access to the finances, some kind of accountant or something. And this is an example of where you really need risk management and oversight. So I hope the federal regulators will really step in and impose some risk management and oversight in this sector, because you can see very clearly that it's very risky to be in this sector if you don't have that risk management and oversight.
Sam's motivation was rooted seemingly in effective altruism, the idea of earning to give. By many accounts, his belief was genuine. How do you think his why influenced his decision-making? What effective altruism teaches is to pursue any means necessary for greater good. By default, it gives validation to all your actions because you're convinced your intentions are more purposeful than those of others.
So effective altruism doesn't say pursue all means for the greater good. It definitely says don't do unethical things. But there are some people within effective altruism who don't take in the message that says don't do unethical things, because when you do unethical things, you have very bad outcomes for other people. You have bad relationships, you hurt society, you take a lot of risks. So if you go to the vast majority of effective altruists, let's say that, and tell them, like, would you be willing to double or nothing the earth with a 51% chance? The vast majority would say they wouldn't. So he's not representative of effective altruists as such. But he was definitely influenced by the movement, and he considered himself an effective altruist. He gave hundreds of millions to effective altruist causes as well as other causes. So he very much came from a narrow, extreme stream of effective altruism. And we have people coming from extreme parts of any movement, and they're going to be weird, right? Because they're coming from because they're representing a very much of an extreme of any movement. So he was very much like on the edge, part of the movement, but on the edge of the movement. And I think the reason, what motivated him and what enabled him to earn that much money was being unethical, was taking unethical risks, immoral risks, things that other people who are effective altruists would never do. Because, again, he was willing to take those risks. That's why he rose into the high position that he did. And we see this in other situations. For example, when WeWork first was going to do a public offering, and we found out how much self-dealing there was within WeWork. The valuation of WeWork collapsed from 80-ish billion to something like 5 billion when that was made obvious, where the founder was taking very big and unethical activities, doing some pretty problematic risks, unethical activities that led to a collapse of confidence in WeWork. Now, it wasn't acting as a bank, and it was still regulated by the US authorities, so it didn't have such nearly a bad outcome. So we see if someone is coming from an extreme position, that's what motivated him. And we can see that that's what led him to this current predicament. But effective altruism is, I don't think, not the cause of what he did. And the vast majority of effective altruists would not endorse the unethical decisions that he did, even before FTX went bankrupt.
John Ray, turnaround artist, is the man that's now responsible for steering FTX through one of the largest and most complex bankruptcies in history. How do you see him handling this mess?
Well, he handled Enron, so hopefully he will be able to handle this mess. This is a really interesting example because the situation, first of all, is made more complicated by the fact that it's an unregulated industry and that there are two competing authorities. The U.S. authority, where FTX declared bankruptcy in the U.S. Court of Delaware, and the Bahamas authority, where FTX is based and Alameda Research is based and incorporated. So we'll see how those two play out. And that makes it, of course, more complicated for the leadership to address the situation. I think what he'll need to do, and what he looks like he's doing, is focusing on transparency, figuring out what is the actual truth and releasing that information. Because he's not the one who was at fault for this mess. He stepped in as the person who is responsible for cleaning it up. But it's very important that he came in completely from the outside separately. He wasn't involved in the mess at all. He was just brought in as the CEO to clean it up, figure out what to do next, manage the bankruptcy. So I think he's a good person to do that as long as he's transparent, focuses on transparency and focuses on fairness, and also focuses on addressing this issue with competing authorities and regulators on what to do. So I think this will be a really challenging but doable process for him given his previous experience with Enron, which was in many ways much more fraudulent, where there was very clear fraud going on, whereas what happened with FTX, we're not 100% sure it was fraud, just because there were no rules in that sort of situation, it seems like, and it was not regulated. Of course, it's unethical, but it may not rise to the level of breaking the law, just because laws don't quite cover that area.
Dr. Gleb, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Really appreciate it.